Hello everybody, my name is James Davies and welcome to Photo Chat Vlog on YouTube. As you can see, today we are at the Photo Chat Vlog table. And because my last video on the Fuji TW-3 was quite popular, in this episode I'm going to show you a bit more about the camera, including how to load a film into it and how to protect it from light leaks. Now I'm going to choose one of my films from this fantastic stash of 24 exposure films. It should say, where is it? There we go, 24 exposure films. The box did used to say freshish, but actually a lot of these are pretty freaky and expired, and I think it would be interesting to go through all of these films sometime, but I don't have time today. But what I think we're going to use is this roll of Agfa HDC Plus, which the box tells us expired in May 2001. Now, I'm guessing the name TW-3 stands for telephoto wide, and you will have seen in the previous video that the camera has two lenses which sit opposite each other underneath this rotating plate. And you switch it on by rotating it to select one of the two modes. So here, it will be in the telephoto mode, and when it's swung round to the wide angle mode, it needs a flash. So when that lens goes into place, the flash pops up. You can do a little bit of focusing. You can select 3 zones with this switch, a 4 meter zone, a 6 meter zone and a 12 meter or infinity zone. And when you switch it off, you can pop the flash back down, and down here this switch is momentary, and I think that allows you to go down to half a meter or 50 centimeters for really close-up stuff. Now on the top you've got the button for the shutter and this little continuous shooting mode option, and you will see it says Fuji TW-3 pre-winding, which we'll see more about shortly. Now over there is the indicator for how many pictures you've taken, and some sort of red light that I don't really know the function of right now. You can also see this logo that says it is DX coded. So what we'll do is put that there and bring in the Agfa HDC Plus film. Now I must apologise here for the framing of this video. I couldn't see how badly it was framed when I was shooting it, so a bit of this is lost unfortunately. But I got this film from a photographic shop in America several years ago, and as I discussed, it expired in May 2001, making it over 19 years old. So let's load it into the Fuji. Now even with the bad framing of this shot, you can see there's a little switch on the back, and when you pop that open, the whole back of the camera swings out, and this bit is where the battery is located. I'm noticing how it feels quite heavy in my hand, but anyway, you can see here how once you slot the film canister in, that it loads the film horizontally, and so all you need to do is tuck the leader in down there. You might spot there's a little sign that says film, meaning get your film in there. There's also a roller that is slightly sticky. Anyway, this is the pressure plate, and when you close up the camera, well, let's see if we get any sound. So I told you about Fuji TW-3 pre-winding. That's what that noise is. And then what it's done is it's pulled all the film out of the canister and rolled it all up onto the take-up spool inside the camera, ready to start shooting. And this means when you get to the end of the film, it's ready to be taken out. There's no need to rewind the film before you open the camera. Now, as I mentioned, if you've seen my previous video about this camera, this particular example has one really sad thing, which is it is a very leaky camera. It has a lot of gaps, and we need to make sure that light doesn't leak into the camera through them, in particular because all of the film is now wound out of the canister which protects it, and it will get light leaks on it and they don't look cool. So one of the features that the TW-3 has is this little window, which not only tells you that there is a film in the camera, but also what actual brand of film it is. But I think that window is also the source of a light leak, as the seal around it has broken down over the years. Similarly, the clasp here, and both the hinge and everywhere where the door can open, is also susceptible to light leaks. So these have all got to be sealed up, and what we do that with is good old black electrical tape, which you can get from DIY stores, like the kind of places that sell electrical items like plugs and wire and screwdrivers. The tape does come in colours other than black, but it's black that really keeps out as much light as possible. And you do want this stuff, the electrical tape, because it's soft and it's easy to use, and if you don't leave it stuck on your camera too long, it doesn't leave a sticky residue like some other types of tape can. And so what we want first off is a little bit to cover this window. It doesn't matter that we can't use the window anymore because we know there's a film in it, and it's far more important that we keep the light out. I'm also going to cut a length of tape to cover the hinge. And like I mentioned about this tape, it's kind of soft and it sort of goes where you want it to go. So I want it to go all along where this hinge is, and as you can see, it's being very agreeable. Now I need to pinch it together when it comes around the curvy bits of the camera, and it just does what I want it to do. It really does. So I'll do that there. And I shall put a little bit along the top there as well. Now you could say it's a shame to be so brutal with how much tape I'm using to cover these bits of the camera, but I really do think this camera is pretty cool when it isn't leaky, and so it benefits in the end from all the effort that I'm putting in now. I'm going to put a tiny little nick in the film here. That will allow me to tape it around itself a little bit easier. Hopefully the flash will still pop up if I don't need it. That piece will go down there, and then I know there's a seam there, so I'll add one more bit of tape there. Now right round the front, it's probably difficult for the light to get around the internal construction of the camera, but just to be on the safe side, I'll add another piece of tape there, although I'll leave that red detailing as part of the original design, and it looks pretty snazzy. Now I have to trim it a little bit here, and there's one more bit needed around there, and one more bit around there. You can't really tell where those bits are because the video is so badly framed. Anyway, hopefully you can see that I had to be quite thorough in my taping up, but the time that I put in now should hopefully reward me later on when I finish the film. So there we have it. The camera is all taped up and ready to go for some half-frame adventures. Now, I shot those videos back in early February 2020, but sadly with this being late March 2020 as I record this, the coronavirus has hit the UK pretty hard, and getting out and about has suddenly had to stop. Now I've had the camera with me whilst I've been at work, and I have shot a lot of images with it, but the chances of me finishing the film and posting it off for development are a bit slimmer now that the UK is well and truly practising social distancing. When we do get through everything that the coronavirus is putting it through, I can share the images on the Agfa film with you if they're worth sharing. But I wanted to get this episode finished, and it therefore seemed a good idea to go back over some of the images I've shot with this camera already, and chat through some of those with you. So I got the Fuji on a trip to Japan, which I made in May 2014, and I'm fairly certain that I got the camera in a shop called Lucky Camera, which is in Tokyo. And honestly, it is 6 years ago now, so I don't have a full recollection of exactly when it was, but I am fairly certain it was there, because I bought some film in some big department stores in Japan, like Yodobashi, but we only went to one dedicated camera store, and I recall that I bought a 28mm lens for my Olympus OM10, and I also bought the Fuji TW-3. But I didn't use it in Japan for whatever reason, and instead I waited until I got back to the UK, and so what we can see here is the first picture that I took after I'd loaded it with some Agfa Vista 200. Now this picture is taken in what was called the Room of Doom in the house in Oxford that I lived in at the time. It was my art studio where I did all my creative stuff, and it was always pretty chaotic compared to the rest of my house. Now this picture stands out in absolutely no shape or form, except that it was the first picture that I took with the Fuji TW-3. It looks like the flash was on, but I have no idea what time of day or night it was. It is simply the first picture that I took. Moving on, I took the camera with me on a cycling trip to Milton Keynes. So I actually drove there from Oxford with my bike in the car. I'd gone for a ride in Milton Keynes, and I used the TW-3 to take pictures whilst I was out and about. So this is some of the classic modern housing from Milton Keynes. If you don't know Milton Keynes, it's a modern planned city in the UK. It was developed in the 1960s and 70s, so lots of the architecture is very of that time. Now if you're from or familiar with the UK, then this sign of the white disc with a black diagonal means that the national speed limit applies, and somebody has graffitied this smiley face onto this particular example. But this picture and this picture were taken at exactly the same point, and they demonstrate me testing the wide angle and the telephoto version of the lens. Again, I was just riding around, just looking about, seeing what was what and looking for anything that took my fancy, because I'd got a half-frame camera, and even with a 24 exposure roll, I was going to get 48 half-frame shots to play with on my film, so I didn't have to particularly worry about what I was shooting. But I do remember that I saw this particular phrase written on the side of this bridge, and it really stuck with me. Sync your heart, not your iPhone. It was a very thoughtful piece of graffiti that really pertains to the modern age in which we live, and I was glad I was able to get a picture of that while I was there. Now this image is just an attempt to capture the very modern state of the city. I think this curvy building is one side of the Network Rail building in Milton Keynes. If anybody's watching this who is from round there and can confirm this, that would be great. This picture? Well, this picture is so wrong in so many ways, and yet it's kind of brilliant, because there are all sorts of converging verticals and horizontals, and yet I managed to get the picture about as unstraight as it can be. Now, I was obviously standing on the wonk, but I probably had my bike with me as well, so what can I say? You're out and about taking pictures left, right and centre with a little pocket snappy camera. This is not Ansel Adams time. Now this one I know I took the picture of because I liked the words, "How worthy of honour is the sea," and I think it's a fish restaurant, and I think in fact it's a branch of Loch Fyne in Milton Keynes. Now this picture is a pretty good example of, if you've ever been to Milton Keynes, of how unique it is compared to your average old school town in the UK. They have these little places where you can get from one side of the road to the other, like road crossings, but if you're walking as a pedestrian, you don't have to get wet whilst you wait for a break in the traffic if it's raining. Now this one's been quite brightly decorated, although the shot, again, is rather wonky. Now that picture is inside one of the kind of shopping arcades of Milton Keynes. I've always liked that back to front writing that you see when you're in there, and that actually turned out to be the end of the first roll anyway, and I thought everything looked okay. I also did some collages on that trip, so this one is of the front of the Network Rail buildings in Milton Keynes. Although looking at the number of pictures that I took, I don't know what I was doing with the camera other than seemingly waving it backwards and forwards quite madly. This collage is a bit more logical. I seem to recall I used the continuous shooting feature on this one, and that's more of whatever a 4-panel version of a diptych or a triptych is called. So I took more of that first roll on a kind of grey day, and I never really got to see what the camera could do with bright sunshine. But I know that the next film that I put in it was a roll of Ilford XP2, and I took the camera on a trip later that year to Snowdonia in North Wales, because my cousin and I decided to climb Mount Snowdon. Now I remember at the time that I was disappointed with these pictures, as they didn't seem to have black blacks and white whites, and they looked very patchy, and I was convinced, in fact, that the photo processor had done a bad job of processing them, to the extent that I actually scanned some of them again myself, and I realised when I did that there was nothing wrong with what the photo processor had done, and it was in fact that the film didn't seem to work well in this camera. Now, having had more experience of both those types of film and the camera, I'm fairly certain you need a lot of light for chromogenic films. They don't perform as well as they could in subdued light, and you certainly need a lot of light for this little half-frame camera. But on reflection, making this video, 5 and a bit years on, I honestly don't know what all the fuss was about. I actually think they look okay, and certainly having climbed several of these types of mountains since I took these photos, they do a good job of demonstrating what being on a misty mountain in the UK is like. As one of me there, it was very windy on that trip and it was very cold. So my cousin and I stayed in a B&B, or bed and breakfast, and we had a small room each, and mine had a single bed in it, and I guess as I was relaxing after the climb I had fun taking pictures of the amenities. But whilst we were in North Wales, we also went to a place called Borthygest on the North Wales coast, where I went on holiday when I was about 10 years old. Now, I'd never been back there in all that time, so I ended up taking a bunch of pictures, such as this ring embedded in this rock, which I expect was there when I went on holiday in 1981, and I expect has been there for a very long time. And looking back at these pictures, I mean, this one of the sea rippling from the top of the cliff is actually pretty good, and this one of the beach at Borth is really nice looking. So I don't know what my problem with it all was. And this one of the little people on the little boat going out looks great, and this one of the garages is equally awesome too. I mean, it's not a sharp lens on the camera, and it's not a refined camera, but this is the kind of picture that were it to be part of what you would call the plates, you know, the photographs in the centre of a book by somebody, well, I think these images wouldn't be out of place in such a place. They have a certain aesthetic for me, and I find it's difficult to talk about this post-Instagram, because I think that Instagram, coming out of the ubiquity of the mobile phone camera and the ability to dial up and look at an image from just about anywhere in the world anytime you want, has meant that the experience of looking through books and magazines to see a corner of the world where you might never get to has changed. Now, I'm not saying it's diluted anything. It's no different to magazines being new in the age of oil paintings and frescoes. But this picture of the garage has got its own mystique and exoticism to me if I think of that idea of learning about the world from far away through books, but it would get lost in the huge world of Instagram. But I definitely like this one of the palm trees, and this one of the beach in Llandudno is pretty good too. Right behind that was this no cycling sign, which has got its own thing going on. And finally, this picture of the O2 Academy was taken on the Cowley Road in Oxford, and I'm perfectly content with this image. I did a couple of photo montages on this trip as well. This one is taken up Mount Snowdon, partway up the mountain, and I think it's pretty good. And this one is a collage from Borthygest, which is pretty epic too. Now, the only problem with all of these collages is it's not actually very easy to see them on screen because they're so wide, but looking back on them, they're pretty good. I really don't know why I was so snobbish about this roll of film back then, but I know I was. It just goes to show what some perspective can do. Now, those pictures were all from 2014, and about a year later I took some more pictures with that camera in 2015, but things were not so good by that time, and something had happened to let the light start leaking in. So you can see here the dreaded red leaking in. Now, these are not good pictures to me. They're just not cool, they really are not. Now, I did do this photo montage within the leaky period in 2015, and this one's worth mentioning because that's Westway House in Botley, which is no longer there. New buildings are now being built on top of it, so that has some historical curiosity, and there may be that light leak showing, but it doesn't look too bad in context, I guess. Anyway, there is a selection of pictures from the Fuji TW-3. Like I say, the coronavirus is keeping us indoors, and it means I'm not going to be able to finish and develop the current roll for a while. So I hope that what you have seen has been interesting for a variety of the types of pictures that the camera can take, from both colour and black and white film. Now, I'd love to hear what you think about the TW-3, and as always, if you like what you see and you're new around here, please subscribe to my channel. If you want to see some of my other stuff, please follow the link on this About Me page where you'll find my Instagram and Flickr pages and so forth. I will see you in the next episode of Photo Chat Vlog. Until then, please take care and remember to wash your hands.